Genesis 2, 1 through 3 reads, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation." You may be seated.
In 1933, the first edition of what became known as Humanist Manifesto 1 was released. Here's the concluding remarks that were made by its author, Raymond Bragg. "Though we consider the religious forms and ideas of our fathers no longer adequate, the quest for the good life is still the central task for mankind. Man is at last becoming aware that he alone is responsible for the realization of the world of his dreams, that he has within himself the power for its achievement. He must set intelligence and will to the task." If you read the summary of Humanist Manifesto 1, basically you can summarize it like this: man is the center of the universe. We're what matters. A committee revised Humanist Manifesto 1. In 1973, they released what is now called Humanist Manifesto 2. Here's the preface to the second one. "It is 40 years since Humanist Manifesto 1 appeared. Events since then make that earlier statement seem far too optimistic. Nazism has shown the depths of brutality of which humanity is capable. Other totalitarian regimes have suppressed human rights without ending poverty. Science has sometimes brought evil as well as good." Talk about an understatement, that the earlier document might have been a little too optimistic. I mean, that's the challenge, right? We've been looking at Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. And if you're part of the small groups that have been meeting this last week, you looked at the chapter that talked about the crown of creation. And the crown of creation was day number 6, and it was us. And with a little bit of bad emphasis, you could place us at the center of the universe. So certainly that's not what Genesis does. It does elevate us. We are, as Tyler said last week, unique, but we're not autonomous. And what the manifesto said is it's up to us. We're autonomous. This is all about us. Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3 does not present man at the center of the universe. Man is hardly mentioned in comparison to the 35 references to Elohim, to God, who is clearly the focal point of Scripture in general and certainly of the creation accounts. There's no doubt who's at the center of the story. I am fascinated by this idea of man being the middle, or the center, the focal point, God being on the throne, and wondering what we might think about the need for some kind of boundary that helps put us in perspective. I still remember 3 little girls visiting the Grand Canyon. Gail and I got out of the car. We started to walk over to the rim. One of the first things I noticed, there was no fence. I had yet to look over the edge to realize the Grand Canyon is one big hole in the ground. And I heard a car door slam behind me as I'm trying to corral these 3 little children, and I heard the scamper of feet on the pavement. And I'm looking around thinking somebody's going right over the edge. Yeah, fences really do have benefit, right? So what kind of a fence, what kind of a boundary do you suppose that God might have placed in the creation story to help us understand where we fit and how we can flourish as people? Now, I know it is not uncommon at all for people to think that the church is nothing more than a bunch of rules to try to make us unhappy, to keep us fenced in. And there's reason for that, I suppose. We have been guilty of having really kind of weird rules. Church that I was converted in would not allow you to watch television or go to movies or, well, I won't bore you with the list of things we weren't allowed to do. I will remind you that that was not uncommon in Jesus' day. The Pharisees had taken Sabbath keeping very seriously, and I don't want to put them in bad light. Please do not misunderstand. The rules that they created because of good motive. They wanted Israel to be righteous, and if Israel was righteous, the Messiah would come. So the more righteous we could be, the more quickly the Messiah would show up. And so they had taken this very simple statement from Genesis chapter 2 that we're going to read, and they had turned it into a set of rigid rules. For example, if you can't work, that would be like you can't plow the ground, so therefore you can't spit because the spit causes the ground to separate. You couldn't work, so you couldn't carry the weight of more than 3 dried figs. Now, you can see how you get there with rules like that. If you can't work, you got to define work, and defining work means carrying something. And carrying something, well, how much could you carry? Well, they decided that the weight of 3 dried figs was about as much as oh, by the way, you couldn't pull gray hair because, well, there's some rule about that. I don't know. Jesus walks into that and is in constant conflict because so much of what he does on the 7th day, the Sabbath day. And you may remember the story early in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus and his disciples are actually plucking grain because they're hungry. And he's confronted. You can't harvest on the Sabbath. And he reminds them of David and some other stories that they should be aware of. And then he makes this profound statement, the one on which I think we have to base all of our understanding about Sabbath keeping. And he said this, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Now, there isn't any question that in Scripture we have this wonderful day 7. If you reach back a couple of weeks, we talked about the first opening verses, the 6 days of creation, and the rhythm that is created. And God said, and it was so. And God said, and it was so. And for 6 days, the rhythm is 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. And then it gets confounded when the 7th day comes. The 7th day is 3 verbs without any of the rest of the rhythm. It's 7, 7, 7. It completes the story. God finished. God rested. That's our word. And God blessed. And the question is, what is it that God actually did when he rested? That's the word Sabbath. It's the Hebrew word Shabbat. It's the word that, well, it literally means he ceased. He stopped. And that's all it says, right? Look at your text, Genesis chapter 2, the one that was just read for us. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, the heavens and the earth were finished. and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. And so God blessed the seventh day, and he made it holy because on it God rested from all the work that he had done. It sounds like God took a breather. He rested. But I find myself wondering, why in the world would God need to rest? Now, I know why I need to rest. You know, you pick up a few flagstones, you carry them across the yard, you pile them, you move a little dirt, and you sit down and you go, phew. Do you think God got tired? Creation was exhausting? I mean, it's a lot of work to say, let there be light. I don't mean to make fun of it, but that's all it was. It was speeches. God said, and it was so. God said, and it was so. God didn't get tired. So what did it mean that he rested from all his labor? Let me take you to the place where the Sabbath is first mentioned as a command, that we should keep the Sabbath. It's the fourth of the 10 words. We call them the 10 Commandments, but to be honest with you, that's not what the Bible ever calls them. They are simply the 10 words. In Exodus chapter 20, we have the first recording of the giving of the law to Moses. And in verse 8 it says, remember the Sabbath day, the rest day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. It still sounds like he rested. He took a break. Except it's a whole new word. In Genesis, God ceased. In Exodus, God rested. It's a different word. And it has a whole different connotation. What Exodus presents to you is a God who took his rightful place. I just rested it on that chair. You get it? I placed it. I put it where it belongs. That's the language that Scripture uses of what God did on the seventh day. He rested. He took his place. He sat where he belongs. He's on his throne. And from there, he rules. And over again in the Old Testament, what you see is seventh-day experiences that highlight that that's what God did. Set up the tabernacle, seventh day, what happens? God fills the tabernacle with his presence. David says, I've got a wonderful house. Let's build one for God. Solomon finally gets around to building a really nice house for God. On the seventh day of the celebration, what happens? God fills the temple with his presence. He rests there. So we come to this story of creation, seventh day. And you'll notice one small difference among all the other differences. There is no morning and evening. This day doesn't end. Resting is a permanent process. All right, so having said all of that, so what does that mean? Does that mean that we really have been violating what God wanted us to do all this time? Because here it is on Sunday, and yesterday, I got to tell you, I didn't sit down and take a break much. What does it mean for us to keep the Sabbath, to be able to honor what God said? What it means is that we rest. We take a break. We cease. But what does that mean? Well, can I just draw some implications? Well, I can. I'm going to draw some implications. You can choose whether or not you want to listen to them and whether or not you want to pay any heed to them. But I'm going to do them. And here's the first one that I'm going to suggest to you, that resting reveals God's rightful role as king. That's what it does. When God rests in Genesis chapter 2, what it says is he takes his rightful place as king. This is the language of David. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. What the creation account does is calls attention to the fact that God is absolutely sovereign, and we should know that by looking. We shouldn't be looking at a world that is as created as this one and as creative as this one and saying, wow, man is the center of all things. It's up to us to make this whole thing work. We ought to be sitting back and going, whoa, this thing is so complex and so complicated, there must have been somebody smarter than me that made it. Unless, of course, you think you're smart enough to have done it. I'll leave that up to you. But think about what Romans says. Romans chapter 1, when it talks about the fact that there are people who are without excuse in their unbelief, what it says is the heavens, the creation itself, revealed this. In fact, the words are this: for what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. His invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly perceived, ready, ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. The psalmist captured it in Psalm 19 by saying, the heavens declare the glory of God, the earth reveals who he is. Day unto day there is speech. There's never a moment of silence that God is not announcing his creative power, that he rules over this whole thing. Go outside and look at the stars. Watch the sunrise. Lots of ways to capture this idea that God is absolutely sovereign. Creation brings with it Sabbath keeping. Now, don't hear seventh day, 24 hours off. Here, what the implication of this is that Sabbath keeping is the internal, intentional recognition that God is the ruler. I love the way this author, Marva Dawn, says it. A great benefit of Sabbath keeping is that we learn to let God take care of us, not by becoming passive and lazy, but in the freedom of giving up our feeble attempts to be God in our lives. You hear it? We stop trying to be God. How many of you are sitting there constantly saying to your heart, beat, 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 beat? Anybody? My guess is that outside of a couple of you, nobody is sitting there going, breathe, breathe. Now, I realize sometimes we have to do. My guess is that every one of you goes to bed at night and never even thinks about the fact that your heart's going to work. Somewhere in there, there's a control system that wakes you up so that you don't have to change the sheets every morning. You don't think about that stuff, right? Because you're not in control of it. And yet somehow in our waking hours, we think it's up to us to be God. Creation reminds us We're not. He is. Let me give you a second implication of creation and resting. Not only does resting reveal God's rightful role, resting provides God's people with needed structure. You and I need some boundaries. We need some structure. Work, by the way, is not a bad thing. You may not always like it, but it's part of creation. God didn't give us work instructions after the fall. He gave us work instructions in the garden. We were given great responsibility to take care of what He created. He gave us something that would give us a structure in our life, that gave us something to do. And one of the things that's most fascinating to me about this whole Sabbath thing in the law, did you notice as we read the text in Exodus, not only do you not work, your family doesn't work, your animals don't work, your servants don't work, even the aliens among you, the sojourners, don't work. So how does this work if nobody's working? Who's planting the crop? Who's tending the garden? Who's putting money in the coffer? How are we going to take care of ourselves if every seventh day everybody stops working? God could not have said more clearly by telling you who does not work that it's not about how much you do to sustain yourself. Remember the story? And if not, I'll remind you. Israel has left Egypt, which, by the way, when the law is given in Deuteronomy chapter 5, that's the reason for the Sabbath. It's the release from slavery, not creation. We get both sides of that. They go out in the morning and there's this stuff on the ground. They called it manna. And they went out and they picked it up and they ate it. That's how God took care of them. He took care of them every day, fed them every day. On the sixth day, they went out and they picked up enough for 2 days. Because on the seventh day, they weren't supposed to do what? Go out and pick up and harvest. Why? Because God wanted them to remember that He was the one who supplied it for them. You didn't have to go get it. He'd already given it to you. He'd already given you the supply. He'd already made it available to you. He had already sustained you. I'm going to give you one more quote from Marva Dawn. On that day, we do nothing to create our own way. We abstain from work, from our incessant need to produce and accomplish, from all the anxieties about how we can be successful in all that we do to get ahead. Taking a day, resting, reminds us God is the supplier, not us. This is not about how much we can produce, how hard we can work, how much we can make, how many things we can have. Resting reminds us that God is the one who supplies. In a conversation that Tyler and I were having the other day, he made this comment and it really struck me. To forsake rest is to forsake God. Because when you think, if I have to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to sustain myself, you are now placing yourself right at the center of the universe as the one who has to supply everything for you. Take a break from yourself. Let me give you a third implication. I am going to give you a practical suggestion or two, but let me give you a third implication. Resting allows God's people room for creative expression. It's resting that allows us It's ceasing from this constant clamor that allows us to be creative in our own right and to find ways of expressing our relationship with God. I love what it says in Exodus chapter 31. Talking about the Sabbath, it says it's a sign. The Sabbath is a sign between me and my people, the people of Israel, that in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested, and what Moses adds is, and was refreshed. He was refreshed. You know, I'm sure that God didn't get tired creating the universe, but I am really positive that what God did was he stepped back, he took a look at the whole thing, and he said, yeah, that's good. In fact, I know that's what he said. He said it's very good. He took a look at it, and he gave this deep sigh of satisfaction. You've done that, haven't you? You've started a project, you've worked on it, you have labored, you've gotten tired because you're not God, but when you were done, you stepped back and you went, yeah, that's good. I think it's what God did. And I think that's what he wants us to do. I think he wants us to find times of refreshment. Please do not read into Sabbath keeping this list of rules about what you cannot do on certain ways and days. Don't think of a seventh day. Think of creative juices of how you can somehow capture refreshment. I just moved 3 big piles of dirt. I was tired, but I was refreshed. If I kept the law the way the Pharisees wanted me to keep the law, I could not have worked yesterday. I didn't move them all yesterday, by the way. But understanding the refreshment side, what refreshes you? Believe it or not, back in the day when I was able, I love to do long runs, 15, 20 miles, alone, just me, my thoughts, God, and a bottle of water. And it was refreshing. What do you do that's refreshing? What do you do that brings life? Again, Marva Dawn has 4 things that she suggests. I mean, among a lot of other things, but she has these 4 things. One of the ways she says to celebrate the Sabbath is just to cease, to stop productivity, to stop looking at yourself as if you're the source of everything, and just sit down, take a nap. Sleeping can be one of the best Sabbaths you've ever had. Just take a break. Stop feeling driven. Go for a walk. Cease. She talks about resting. Literally, go on vacation. Not the kind of vacation that you have to have a vacation from when you get back. That doesn't count. Just literally rest. She talks about embracing certain kinds, embracing spiritual disciplines, embracing community, embracing a small group, finding intentional rest in the community of people around you, with your family. Go to a track meet or a cross-country meet or a football game and just wear yourself out resting as you celebrate your life with your family, your friends. Her 4th suggestion is that you feast. And she means it literally, feast on beauty. Do you ever just go out and look at the beauty of the world? You ever just look at art and just marvel at somebody else's creation? Do you ever just look at the birds and just go, wow, they're gorgeous? Do you ever just feast on really good food? Now, I'm not talking about, just going out because you want. I'm talking about intentionally saying, I am going to do this. I am going to feast on this as a celebration of God's gift to me. One of the things that I lost during my cancer treatments was the ability to taste. Even ice cream was awful. And that, my friends, was awful. I am so grateful that most of my taste is back. And I assure you, ice cream is among them. For me, on a Tuesday, to get 2 scoops for the price of 1 is Sabbath. Can you hear it? Can you hear this? This is what I think Sabbath keeping is about. It's about refreshment. It's about resting in what God does for you and what gives you, in the best sense of the word, pleasure, refreshment. There's a fourth implication. I'll just say it briefly. This resting that we do now, intentionally taking a break, is the anticipation of an eternal rest. See, we're not there yet. We still work at this, right? Sometimes this can still be a little hard. Let's just be honest with each other. Sometimes living life can just be a little tough, and there is going to come a day that we all look forward to when we think to ourselves, there's got to be more than this. There is. The Hebrew writer said it this way: while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For good news came to us just as to them, but the message they heard did not benefit them because they were not united by faith with those who listened. We who have believed enter that rest. We get a little taste of it from Jesus when he says, "Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me." Tired? Come to me, he says. All of you who labored, come to me, because in him there is rest. And it is a picture of the eternal rest for those who say yes to him. We celebrate that rest every week. This, my friends, is Sabbath keeping, because this is an opportunity to be refreshed, to come, to remember, to proclaim this eternal rest that God has given us. Jesus came to an earth that he created. He became flesh like us, and he labored. He worked. He worked so that he could provide an eternal rest that would never end. He did it by letting his body be broken, and we celebrate that. We remember that, and we live in anticipation because of it. Together we eat. Jesus shed his blood. I'm pretty sure by the end of carrying his cross and suffering the way he did, he was tired. Literally tired. So tired he couldn't carry his own cross part of the way. But he did it. He did it so that that promise that was made could be kept. There would be an eternal rest for all of us. In his blood, we find that rest. The Hebrew writer is just a little scary when he talks about that rest, because this eternal rest to which we have been invited, which we anticipate as we rest even today, only goes to those who want it. The rest, who dismiss it, don't receive it. And so we're always wanting to say to you, say yes to Jesus. And today would be a really good day for you to say yes to an eternal rest by coming to him.